Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'm going to be working on my Northern Bog Forest. This forest is a mixture of black spruce and native larch trees. And today I'm going to prune up the forest and clean up the landscape and get it ready for spring. Here's a look at the forest. So I notice there's lots and lots of weeds on the forest floor, so I'll have to pick all those out. There's leaves and debris. And once that's done, I'm going to prune up the trees, giving them a bit of a structural prune so they're ready for spring growth. I'll begin by picking out all the weeds, and there's lots of them, trying to get them out by the roots so I have less for next year. And I've always said, forests take a lot of maintenance. The forest floor, there's a lot of trees in this planting, so it takes a lot of work to keep the forest looking its best. But I do like this kind of work. When I'm working on the forest, it feels like you're actually in a forest, and it's a nice feeling. I call it being in the bonsai zone, where your forest looks like full-size trees. Yeah. Oh, I'm getting some help here. No, it's not playtime. It's not playtime, Joan. Oh my goodness. I find it's best in these forests just to work on a small section at a time, cleaning up all the weeds. Otherwise, it's kind of overwhelming to try and clean up the entire planting. There's that weed out, and there's lots of needles and debris I can clean up here. And any moss like that that's full of weeds, I just pull it out and it'll regrow. It's easier than, trying to pull the weeds out of the moss. And you can always plant new clumps of moss in the bare areas. There's a weed that I got by the roots. And you'll find some weeds are really easy to pull out, and other ones are really hard. I find liverwort is one of the worst. It kind of mixes in with the moss, and it can be very difficult to remove, but you just gotta keep at it, and eventually it does disappear. I've got lots and lots of larch needles that have fallen down. And you can leave the larch needles on. They decompose over the summer, but it's nice to have a nice clean landscape. It always looks really nice if it's lush and full of moss. And you need a pair of tweezers to get in and reach all these weeds that are in between all the trees deep in the forest. And I've always said, bonsai isn't about dramatic transformations all the time. It's about continuous improvement, little changes that build up over time and eventually, make dramatic changes in the future. So yeah, it's kind of meticulous work, but that's what bonsai is all about. Keeping up with your trees, keeping the moss from climbing up the trunks. So the weather today is just slightly below freezing, and it may warm up just above freezing. Today is the high. I think the high is supposed to be 0 or 1 degree. So freezing or 1 degree above. So it's not going to get really warm. And there is a chance of either snow or some rain today. There's some of the leaves I'm pulling out of the forest. Yeah, so it's certainly warmer than it has been. We had a real cold spell, so it feels quite nice out today. So as I said in one of my other videos that I said I was going to be working on this forest, and I said there'll be a lot of work in this video for me, but it may not be that long a video because I'm not going to show all this work cleaning up the forest floor. It'll be, I'll work away out here in the greenhouse on it, and it may take me quite a few hours to work away cleaning up the landscape, but yeah, it's just something I have to do, and I think it'll look quite nice when it's all done. It always feels good to clean up your landscapes. And I've mentioned before that you don't see a lot of forest plantings at bonsai shows because I think they do take a lot of work, both pruning the trees and keeping the landscape looking good. Yeah, it's not for everyone, but they are very spectacular when they're done, and when they're done really nicely, they can look really nice. Definitely, one of the favorites at shows are forests. People feel like they're really into the forest, and if you get a realistic looking forest, it just looks spectacular. So I wondered, when the weather warmed up, if Joan, the cat, would want to stay here in the greenhouse, and she does. She really likes it in here. I thought, maybe once it warms up, she'll be back to being outside as a stray cat, but she seems to really like her home here in the greenhouse, her bed. I feed her in the greenhouse now, so yeah, and she still won't go in the house at all. She's very scared of going indoors. And I was talking to the owner of Joan. He lives 8 doors down the street, and when she disappeared for those 10 days, he had her in his house, and he said all the other cats he has pick on her, so he has to keep her in a room by herself. And she said once the weather warmed up, she snuck outside, got through the door and got outside, and then she came straight back over here. So he was happy that she's being taken care of and has a home. And he has a lot of cats, so he doesn't really miss her too much. Yeah, so that's the story of Joan. Well, this front section's looking better already. Yeah, it looks much more miniature looking. I will have to prune the moss. It's getting quite long and fluffy. And I've got to reestablish maybe my deer trails through the forest, my animal paths. That always looks nice too, to have some realistic features in your forest. You don't have to have them, but it's a nice touch. You can have like a fantasy forest where, maybe there's more moss and lushness that you would see in a real forest. Or you can have them very realistic looking. All depends on your tastes and what you feel like doing at the time. Now I've got a lot of this Irish moss here that I gotta pull out by the roots. Look at that clump of it. Wow. Horrendous. That stuff spreads like crazy and has deep roots. Definitely something you don't want in your forest. And again, if you keep working at it, you'll get rid of it. It's just a matter of keep at it, keep picking it out. It does spread really easily. My goal for this forest is to keep the trees a really tight conical form, and I'm going to try and tighten them even more if I can. It'll be interesting trying to keep them, you know, pruned very tightly over the upcoming years to see if I can do it. So far I'm keeping the conical form, but a lot of them are starting to get quite wide, wider than I wanted. But, you know, I can only do so much. I'll just try and keep them as tight as I can, and I don't mind growing them taller. I think they could use more height, but which will help kind of create the illusion that they're slim, a slim conical form for sure. But yeah, I'll just have to see how tightly I can keep them in the future. Okay, well, this area is looking better. It's looking very nice and green. Makes a big difference cleaning these forests up. Oh, I've got grass growing back here. Oh my goodness. So I'll just keep working away and see what I can get done today. If I don't get to the pruning, well, that's okay. I'll do it on the next day. As long as it gets done is the important thing. There's another clump of grass in here. Got it by the roots. There's another clump of grass in here. Wow. Some weeds galore. So Joan is in the greenhouse here, and outside is the father of the kittens. There he is there. We call him Jonas. Hi, Jonas. I know what he wants. Hey, and you don't really want to go outside with him, do you? No, you like it in here. I have finished the weeding of the forest. And here's all the weeds I took out. There was a lot. Some of them had pretty big roots. Yeah, so I would say I got 90% of the weeds pulled out with the root system attached to them. And the other ones, I'll just have to keep my eyes on the forest, and as weeds start popping up, I'll pull them out. So my next task is to clean up the needles. And before I do that, I have to make sure all the needles have fallen off the trees. You can see there's a lot of needles in here that are hanging on the branches. So I think I'll get a little brush and just kind of come in and try and brush off all the hanging needles off the trees. And then I'll clean up the forest floor, cleaning up all the needles. Yeah, the brush seems to work quite well. You can see all the lichen on this tree. I'm going to have to clean that off too. Yeah, so that's my next task, is brushing all the needles off the trees and cleaning up the forest floor. But it's looking much better now. I really get the impression I'm in a forest here now. Kind of nice. And I really like this planting. It really reminds me of the northern landscapes you see with the conical trees. Yeah, it's a real beauty. I've been working away on the forest, clearing all the needles out, and it's getting there. It's looking really good. I'd say I have probably 80% of the needles removed now. Yeah, it's looking much more like a miniature forest. And I really enjoy doing this work, cleaning it up and making it look good. It's, yeah, one of the joys of bonsai, I think, is making your trees look really, really nice. Hey, Joan, you got your tongue sticking out. So I was petting the father of our kittens, Jonas. Yeah, he let me pet him. He was very, very friendly. So he's still hanging about outside somewhere. So I've got to go for lunch now. So I will return, and then I think we're ready to start pruning up the trees.